While we're waiting for our IT guy to get things
Okay,
worked
we are
out,
live.
Are we good?
Yeah, I just want to share with you a letter we got at City Hall this morning. And
This is
you
cute.
won't be able to read it, but you'll be able to get what it's like. It's from a child. And it's addressed, Dear Prospect, I would appreciate if you all could please make this whole neighborhood smoke-free. I would be so thankful, especially the park, because I found cigarette butts, and then it's got some pictures going. This looks like a small child wrote this. I just wanted to share it with you.
Thank you. Okay,
I think, don't we have a non-smoking,
Yes.
part of our restrictions for use of the park? Isn't that one of the park guidelines?
The park
do.
rules say no, no alcohol, drugs, smoking, or vaping are permitted.
Yeah.
Ron, do you know what the signage is for like Harrods Creek Park or some of the? That's the only one I can think of offhand that has the sign by the gate that says what some of the restrictions are. Do you know if it says like if there's another sign that says no smoking or if it says it on there? Do you know?
It says it on the big brown sign down by the kiosk.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there was any way to more prominently post that separate from some of the other restrictions, that would be good. And especially, I think of that living with our backyard to the forest and to the parks, when it's so dry in the summer, we kind of get a little concerned about the possibility of a fire. So I think it would be good to have more prominent messaging there.
In our brochure about the parks, on the back, park rules, one of them is alcohol, drugs, smoking, and vaping are not permitted in any park. So that's on here.
Well, and like everything else, it's a matter of, enforcement or people being willing to abide by the rules. So.
Yeah, and there's no way to enforce it really, but I think if I'm sure a lot of people don't even read the kiosk, they just set out to hike, and I think if that were more prominently posted with some signage, that might be a good thing to do.
Well, we can certainly take a look at that and see. I know, I think Ron agrees with me that, another sign. I've actually had people on the trails complain to me about the number of signs in the park. So that is something we need to think about. But
maybe that should be one of the park rules. No signs.
I forget what the exact count was, but it's something like there are 30-something signs in between the front gate and the gate leading to the Orange Trail. And it's just right there.
So maybe the key is sign removal and only putting super pertinent signs back. Maybe that should be the investigation. Minimize signs with.
Yeah, and I mean, I was more thinking of a signage at the entrance to the trails, not on the trail.
Well, something we can definitely think about. I think, David, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I agree with Carolyn. I think a comprehensive sign at the beginning of the trail is appropriate. And I would like to include having your dogs on leash. I continue to see people with dogs off leash on the trail.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I think it's great to have it in the kiosk, but like I say, I think a lot of people don't read that and something more prominent at the very trailheads of both the orange trail and the blue trail would be good.
Okay, we'll take that under advisement. I guess I need to officially call the meeting to order. This is the March meeting of the Prospect Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. And the first order of business is approval of the February minutes. Does anyone have any changes or corrections?
Move approval.
Okay, a second? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. I'd like to give a brief update, parks update, and then, as I mentioned, we want to spend the bulk of our meeting talking about the list of ideas for future improvements in the park. I'm happy to report that ICF, that's the new name of Ecotech, ICF has begun the removal of invasive plants in Harris Creek Park. They worked all day yesterday and they're working all day today. And what they're focusing on is cutting, right now they're cutting and painting the honeysuckle plants, the large ones. They're leaving the small ones intact. And when they come back for their second round, once things have leafed out, they'll be doing some foliar spraying. And they're really making, I was down there this morning and connected with them, and they're really making good progress. So that's good. I also saw the maintenance guys cleaning the canoe launch, which had quite a bit of mud after the flood. Putney Pond Dam didn't sustain any damage over the recent flooding, so that's good. Also, that washout we've been talking about along the Green Trail, we have a temporary fix on that. A couple of weeks ago, Stuart went out on a weekend and he tried to kind of move some rocks around to divert, when there's water coming down that gully, to divert it to away from the trail. But this is not a permanent fix. It will wash away again if we don't get gravel or some kind of stonework done there. And then also yesterday, Mayor Evans forwarded to me an email with a couple of pictures of a resident, a mother with her two sons, age 6 and 11, who took it upon themselves to clean up trash they found along the trail. And I asked her if I could show pictures. I think I'll try to get back in touch with her. She didn't really answer my question. I said I didn't want to identify her children by name or show pictures unless she gave us approval for that. But it might be something fun to put in a newsletter article about kids cleaning up the park. So I'll get back in touch with her and see if we can use those pictures. They found a great big long piece of PVC pipe, which I had seen along the trail, and I just couldn't figure out a way for me to, with my trekking poles, to carry it back. It was along the Green Trail, so I think it must have washed over the cliff and then ended up there. But they had a full garbage bag full of trash that they found along the trail. So
On an up note, the big log that was right next to the canoe launch for the last year floated on down.
That's great. So that's all I have for the parks update. I don't know, Mr. Mayor, if you have any other comments that you wanted to make?
No, I made my opening comment. One other thing, we're going to be starting to put the budget together the last half of this month. So, and we'll probably wrap that up during the month of April. So you need to do a little strategic thinking and planning about what you would like to see included.
Exactly, and that's kind of the reason we're going through this process today. I do have one more item that I should mention, and that's, you remember that the Forestation Board worked with us and planted 4 swamp oaks along the path to the trail to the canoe launch. And they all went underwater, but Lee Tusey, who I see is on our call today, reported that they survived the flood. They seem to be doing okay. So that's good news. And as someone in the Forestation Board commented, they're called swamp oaks for a reason. They can deal with water.
That was me.
Oh, that was you. Okay. So thank you all for forwarding your ideas to Sarah. And when we get to the part about Little Honey Creek Park, I'll let Sarah talk about what they're doing for. I'll let Sarah chime in and talk about the planning for the playground. But let's start with, if you've got your list in front of you, or someplace on a computer screen, let's start with Harrods Creek Park. I certainly am, when it comes to the invasive plant removal, ICF, as they're now called, indicated that it usually takes about 3 years for to deal with an area, because you'll get new sprouts the next couple of years, and then we'll get to a point that we can probably manage with volunteers. So I am very committed to trying to get additional money in the budget for next year to do invasive plant removal, and I consider that a high priority. I don't know if anyone else has other comments.
I would totally agree with that, Linda. And, I think ideally, if we could have done the whole, whatever it was, $45,000 project, if we could have signed a contract for that, I would have been in favor of that. But if we can do it in phases, where we don't have to sign a contract for the whole thing, but is that a possibility?
Yeah, in fact, we can't commit more than 1 year at a time. So there's no way we could do a 3-year project, but we could certainly have our intention to be that every year we'll spend another, $10,000, $15,000, and over time we'll get through the
right.
whole project.
And what is the guideline for having to bid it out? What is the price point there?
I've been told anything over $30,000.
Okay, so we could do the next phase of it in this coming fiscal year without having to bid it out, correct?
Right. That's correct.
I think that should be the first priority to move ahead with that, because I feel like if we don't try to do it all, then the money that we have spent, will be counterproductive in the long run.
Right. Any other comments on that? And let's move to number 2, the gravel for the Orange Trail Hill. We did some gravel last year. It's held up quite well. There's a few little cleanup things that need to be done. We've got the contract signed, or the proposal has been approved and signed. And Grayson will do another section of it, but there's still a little bit more that's going to need to be done after that. So again, I consider it a high priority. It's too big for a scout project because you need heavy equipment to really move that gravel and put that in there. But I think we need to do it. It's a matter of safety and access for Ron and his crew to maintain the trails. And I don't know, Ron, do you want to chime in on your thoughts about that? You're muted.
While he's finding his unmute button, I had a question that it'll require Ron to chime in on too. Is I've noticed that and it might be that it just needs more gravel, and I think so 100%. I'm curious if each time I've walked it, it seems to be getting more difficult to like get your footing, like that, I'm consider myself a pretty stable, kind of hiker. And I wonder if there's a way to kind of take some of those mattixes or something and then be able to put like a little piece of like a wood or something to give your feet something to grip as you walk up. I don't know if that's possible or if it's just, well, the gravel's worn away and that's just that's just what it is. But does that make, something to grab onto? I don't know. So Ron, tack that onto whatever
Sounds like the trail in the Grand Canyon. That's the way they have those trails.
Is it?
The problem with the orange trails, we can't do anything like that would impede the equipment going down the hill or up the hill.
Okay. And is that even if it wasn't a step, but just something your toe could grab onto, or is it probably the equipment would damage whatever stuck out anyways? And if it was just like something for your toe to push off of, does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what we could do with that though. That wouldn't
fall apart when you.
It's hairy enough taking one of those lawnmowers down that backside of that hill anyway.
That's fine. I'm just curious.
I don't want to make it worse.
Sarah, I understand 100% what you're saying, but any piece of equipment, even if we take the pickup trucks back there for a medical run or something, is going to damage all that in one run.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, then never mind. Thank you.
So is the additional graveling something that we can work into the budget in addition to the invasive removal for next
That would
fiscal
be,
year?
we can ask. I think we put together a list of our high priority projects, and the people that put together the budget will decide how much we've got available.
Do we have any idea of what that would cost based on what we've done in the past?
Yeah, we did 5,000, well, maybe it was a little over $5,000 last fiscal year. I think it was maybe 6,000 or so. We got a bid for 5,000 for what we're doing this year. And I think there'll be about another 5,000. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ron, but I think, that should do it.
And what about the invasive removal for the next go round? What would be the cost of that?
Well, they can accommodate whatever we want to do. My intention was we're spending $12,300 this year. And I think that I would plan to ask for about the same amount for next year, and just say if we can get between $10,000 and $15,000 in the budget each year for the next 2 or 3 years, I think we'll be in pretty good shape. Now, we also have quite a few invasives around Putney Pond as well, and we haven't even talked about that because we're kind of waiting to see what the Putney Pond study comes back with in terms of recommendations. But I'm pretty sure that I was out with that group last week, and one of the things they were doing was writing down all the invasive plants that they found. So I think we'll be looking at recommendations to be doing some of that at Putney Pond as well.
But I need a little bit of education. So my question is, we're talking about spending a lot of money to start to get rid of invasives. Okay. My question basically is, what's wrong with them? Why do we care about these so-called invasives?
What they do is they inhibit the native plants. And we've seen just in the volunteer work that we've done in all the parks, just pulling garlic mustard has really increased the number of wildflowers and variety of native plants. Some of these invasives actually inhibit the germination of native plants.
Aren't the
Um,
invasives native?
No, they're exotic. They're mostly from Europe or Asia.
Yeah, all the parks, outside Prospect, other parks, the Cherokee Park and, the parklands, they're all dealing with these issues of invasives. And so this is not just something that we're focused on. It's something that our park system in general is addressing as well.
I'm
They
not
tend to
trying,
starve.
really, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just trying to understand.
Sure.
And it kind of sounds like you're shoveling sand against the tide.
They tend to starve the local soil of nutrients too, so you get a lot of soil erosion, which is huge in some of our areas. So if you can't get anything else to grow there and all the nutrients are pulled out of the soil and then it erodes, we're like all this gravel we're putting everywhere, not like Orange Trail, but like you're going to start seeing the trails fall apart and some of the stuff we're trying to remedy get worse because they consume a canopy, nothing can grow underneath, or they starve the nutrients and nothing will grow, and then it's just dirt and it just washes away. We've got a huge problem with that in general.
Is this going to be a continual expense?
What I
addressing
think,
related-
when I talked to Lee Droppelman, who's the head of this company, he said, when they're doing invasive removal, it's kind of a 2 or 3 year project. Each year you have fewer plants you need to deal with. And once they do it for 2 or even 3 years, we probably can manage it by volunteers. The problem is that nothing was done for 40 years. I don't know, however long that land's been there, owned by the city. And before we even made it a park, there was nothing to kind of manage the invasives. So once we get a handle on it, I think we will be able to maintain with volunteers. It's just there's too much work that needs to be done right now.
Yeah, and from our last meeting, it seemed to be apparent that there was quite a bit of support on the council for doing that, for getting it done. And I think, the broader that we can push it as far as being as comprehensive as possible, the more effective it will be in the long run and not having to continually battle the problem and create an expenditure for the city.
Can we move the conversation on, or does anyone else have a concern? The next one is the Green Trail washout repair. And I don't know, I think we're going to maybe need some professional help on that. And until we get a chance to meet with John Henry, I don't know. I don't know what to even budget for something like that. Do you have any thoughts, Ron?
As soon as I can nail John down, we'll be able to. Matter of fact, I'm going to send him a text right now.
Okay. We've got some parking lot repair that needs to be done in Harrods Creek Park. It's maybe you can describe it, Ron, and how it's going to be addressed.
What it is where the creek crosses under the drive coming in, that tube got clogged up during a previous storm. And the water came over the road. When it did, it eroded an area just as you turn into the parking lot, and it directed all that water out into the parking lot. So the drainage at the other end got blown out. It's an easy fix. All we'll do is get a truckload of riprap and grout it in place. And we can pretty much do that in-house. That's not going to be an issue.
And my understanding is that would be something you do this year with.
Yeah.
I know rock's not too expensive, but there's
No, rock's
some
cheap.
budget. Okay. So that'll be this year. Okay. Wildflower Walks, I don't see us having one this year.
No.
Maybe next. I know I think, Ron, am I right that you put either sent out a city mail or put something in the newsletter with some pictures of wildflowers that Jacqueline had provided?
I believe we did that last year. Yeah. I'd have to go back and look.
You'll go back and look, but I think we could do the same thing. I know Sally Snyder indicated that she was interested in putting together some kind of a pamphlet that would identify or put something up in kiosks with pictures. I think you talked to her, Sarah, am I right? Or did she include that in her suggestions?
She did mention that she would help or was interested in helping with some kind of, aided brochure, paper, something so that people could do their own wildflower walk. I have not got back to her with it yet, since this is our first time we're kind of organizing it. So I'd have to check with her and see kind of what her, what exactly she had in mind, or if it was just, hey, give me something and I'll put it together or whatever. But I think she was interested in making sure people could go out and actually see and still do something if they were interested. That might be something, Ron, we could maybe put on the website, indicate at the kiosk, hey, go here, a little QR scan this, check out the wildflower sort of scenario that would link to maybe something instead of a paper product, I'm not just spitballing.
And I think that Jacqueline McGrail would be, and maybe Carolyn would be interested in working on putting together something like that. I don't know. But I do think that's something we could kind of do in-house with kind of minimal expense.
Yeah, the one thing I would suggest is if we do something like that, to make sure we have a notation on there that asks people to please not pick the wildflowers,
right?
To leave them there for others to enjoy. Because almost every year when I hike during the spring, I see little girls with their bouquet of wildflowers they picked. And I want to shake my finger and go, oh no, but I don't. But I think education is the way to go with that.
Okay. So the next item and this is repeated in some of the other park lists too, is, and this is Sarah's idea, a fishing rod holder at the benches along the creeks.
And I had no vision of what that looks like. It was just, I was telling Ron, I was like, I see people take their grandkids or their kids. They go to the benches right by the creek. They put their blankets down. The kids are like, the parents are, hold on to, all you have to do is hold on to it. And they're all over the place, and it's just a mess of snacks and fishing rods. And then they drop it, it hangs off the tree or something. I was like, man, there could just be a little thing they could set it in and the kids could pick it up and then they could set it down and have their snack. We're like just the distracted kid running around. Put your fishing rod here. I thought that would be so cool, but I am the fishing is the side accessory for me sitting by the water. So I'm not a aficionado enough to know what that looks like. And so I was hoping if anyone else has any idea of what I was thinking, scouts, like something adhered to the bench, but I would need Ron or anybody else who's a fisherman kind of thing to think through what that would look like. It is not going to be, well, I'll Google. I'm happy to find the internet solution, but it wouldn't come from me.
Lynn, I think you indicated this might be something that scouts could do. I don't know if you have any thoughts about what it would be.
If we could find something, if there's a commercial product that's heavy duty and we're happy with it, and Ron, you think it works, then we could, spec that and use that. There might be some stuff we can make. I don't know. So obviously we don't want to, a couple pieces of PVC pipe down there. So we want something that would look nice and hopefully not be vandalized or taken. So some challenges to overcome.
I had in my mind some kind of wood scenario, but again, that could be like, Sarah, you don't know what you're talking about, and I'm okay with that. But
well, maybe that's just something we kind of put on our list of potential scout projects and see where it goes.
One nice thing about, by itself, if a scout's installing something like that, that's not a whole lot of work or justifiable for an equal project. But you could add it on to another project. So if they're doing something, say, oh, by the way, part of that includes putting 5 of these in, that kind of stuff we could do.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
I did find what we did last year in the newsletter.
Oh, uh-huh.
Hold on just a second. And that was it.
Ah, okay.
Had 2 pages, and we challenged people to go out and see how many of them
Yeah.
they could find. So
So
But
we could
that's what we
certainly
did
do
last
something
year.
like that again. Good.
all right.
So the next item on the list was to expand the parking lot, and I guess I'd like some thoughts about that. We've got some other pretty big projects going on, so I'm not sure that's a good one for this upcoming year. But I'm welcome to hear what other people have to say.
Is it possible? I guess that's the first question.
A few years ago, when we did the original parking lot, we talked to QK4, and I'm blanking on Steve Emley, who was involved with MSD, and then he went to work for QK4. I understand he's not there anymore, but he thought we could add about another 15 spaces. There are 19 down there now, so it wouldn't quite double it. And he said beyond that, we get into the area that floods. So I don't know. It would require building a retaining wall. It would require moving some dirt from one side to the other. I think it would be a fairly large project.
Linda, the only comments I've had from citizens in the last probably 2 years was, why is there, and I know I brought this up before, why is there the parking lot, then gravel, then a nice paved path? If I think it's kind of, in my opinion, be more important just leave the parking lot the way it is and pave that little part that's missing. So somebody that's in a wheelchair could at least get all the way down to the ramp, or at least more towards the Orange Trail rather than just sitting in a parking lot. We have handicap parking down there, but then they have to trip over rocks to go get anywhere.
Right.
So I don't, whether the parking lot gets expanded or not, that might be something just to look at, just getting that one section completed.
And I agree with Harold. Just something to consider for the context of the list that Linda's reading is think out to 10 years plus. So don't think of any of these projects that she's mentioning. Like think of, hey, what can we do this year, and what can we maybe do next year? But also think, hey, my long-term vision, ideal, money aside, where do I see that park going? That's the eye you need to have on what she's listing. Just to bring some kind of context to it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I would agree, Harold. I think in that stretch, it would have to be concrete because of the water situation. And I don't know, Ron might have an idea of how much concrete that would take and we could look and see what the stretches that we concreted before cost.
Yeah.
So I think that's something to take a look at. I've just added that to the list.
So the parking lot is nice. I mean, trust me, I utilize it. We start at the Orange Trail, but if it were full, I just park at the top like we used to do all the way up until the parking lot was there. If you're going to the park, you're going there to hike. Now, I understand if you're handicapped, that's why I have handicap spots down there, but they're kind of useless just because of the rock. If you're in a wheelchair, if you want to bring, your grandmother down there or whatever, you have nowhere to go because you're going to have to go over the rocks and like, that's just a mess. I don't want to deal with it. So it's kind of pointless, in my opinion, not having that park paved. Adding 15 more spots, the people that hike are going to walk anyway, right? So what do you want to spend the money on?
Yeah, on the other hand, if we were going to do anything else down, in that area, in the meadows, I think expanded parking would be a good thing for people who maybe aren't hikers. So I think it should stay on the list as a long-term goal. If we're thinking 10 years down the road, I think expanding the parking lot would be a good thing to do.
Agreed. So
Don't think I'm 100% against the parking lot. I'm not, but if
I know
that's a possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll leave that on the list, and I've added the paving that gravel strip because I think that is important for us to provide better access. The next step, or the next one, is I think an idea of Sarah's, so I'll let you address it. Putting a swing set someplace. I think you were thinking of along the top of the Orange Trail or something.
I didn't care where. It can only go in so many spots, to be honest, down there. The only thing I was thinking, we have the little benches that kids get on and swing, and they're awfully like rowdy on them as small children. And so I was thinking, if there was a way to incorporate some form of slightly more kid style, not like full on playground equipment kind of thing. And I don't know if there's probably a very gray area there as to what that would be. That would just be something that, the kids could go swing without taking up kind of the like adult relaxation thing. And then they bang the posts back and forth. And then Ron's got to go out and the whole thing's like tipping because, all the kids were like, yeah, so that was just what I think would be neat. The feasibility, I actually don't, I can't think of a spot right off the top of my head. Ron mentioned, hey, there's potential at the hill by the parking lot, kind of farther up. If there was a little level spot, when you come in the park, you're getting ready to leave, like, okay, kids, last moment of energy. Let's just get it out before you get in the car. It was more of sort of a pipe dream to put out there and just see if anybody had something in mind that would work with that. Just to give a more appropriate swing for someone who's going to destroy those larger ones that are out there.
Any comments? All right, moving on. The culvert that allows the stream crossing as you get to the Orange Trail. A couple of people have said that appears to be deteriorating. It's going to have to be replaced with something because we've got to take equipment over. And someone had mentioned to me once that you can buy old railroad flat cars that aren't, they're retired, which would be strong enough. It's got to be something strong enough to take heavy equipment. And I don't know how many years we've got of useful life with the culvert as it is, but I think this would be, again, a pretty expensive item. Probably not something we want to put in next year's budget, but something we ought to be looking at. It's possible we could apply for some grant money. The trails, whatever that program is, Sarah, maybe even the land water conservation, but I don't know. So Ron, do you have any thoughts about when we really are going to need to do something with that?
It's hard to say, because it all depends on how much damage it takes from the floods. I'd say we at least got another 5 out of it easy.
But we should be thinking now about what needs to go there. And I don't know who we talk to get an estimate for cost. I can try.
I was actually just looking at them online to see if I could get a general idea.
I saw one that advertised those old railroad flat cars for about $20,000 to $25,000. And then I don't know what it would take to get it.
Yeah, me
I don't know
either.
if that's transport included. And then I don't know how it's installed or who would have to do that.
Yeah, that's above my pay grade.
Yeah.
I think
guess
what we
we
have
just
to do is probably talk to one of the
Contact.
engineer. One second. Talk to one of the engineer firms and tell them, hey, we wanted to do, we had this rail car idea, and they could probably go, okay, that narrows you down into this bucket, or okay, well, we'd have to check it, inspect it, modify as required, doable, not doable, whatever. I think we could probably get away with a free thought process on that, and then a free, okay, if you did that, and all things being equal, we'd need these, types of posts, types of securing, whatever. And I think for free we'd be able to get this is the ballpark you're looking at. Do you want to engage in finding out what that real answer is or no?
You're muted, David, if you're talking to us.
So am I back on now? Linda, is the rail car that you're talking about for the bridge, is it wooden or is it metal?
No, it'd be steel.
Steel, okay, all right.
And then, they'd have to fabricate some kind of railings and I don't know what else. Or maybe not, but I guess we don't have railings on it now.
I think when we thought we had money, that would be something we could apply with the recreational trail program, the RTP grant, when we actually thought we would have the matching bid to it.
And I think what we need to do is just say, well, we're not going to try to put it in this next year's budget, but we ought to start investigating. It should be on the list of things to investigate, options, and get some idea of pricing. Okay. Pave a trail from the parking lot. So, Sarah, I think that was your idea, and I think you were talking about actually paving the Orange Trail. Am I right? Or was that? Or is this the strip?
Sorry, there's a car. I think there's a separate one for paving the trail in for a portion of the Orange Trail, and then part of it was the part Harold has already talked about.
That Harold talked about.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I put words that I put on there. I used I didn't differentiate between paving or concreting. I just put the word paving for everything. So,
Okay.
As you're taking your notes, if you feel free to change, but.
And then there's been some discussion of trying to do an amphitheater in the meadow.
Yeah, David and I have talked about that, and he has a resource that's available to give us advice. David can tell you more about that, but before he does, I'm not so sure that that's a good location for a community amphitheater because several things. One, it floods. Two, for the community to get down to it on a kind of one-lane road doesn't seem like that would be the best spot for having a place for musical or other performances. We should be thinking about other locations, I think, than Harrods Creek Park. Really, the only one that's occurred to me is the Putney Pond Park.
We're under a conservation easement, and we can build things that the Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund approves, but it's really supposed to be a natural area. So I doubt that we could get approval for a large amphitheater. We might be able to have a small educational classroom type thing.
Well, David, I didn't mean to preempt you. Why don't you express yourself?
So you never preempt me, Mayor. But I think from some of my prior experiences in Cincinnati with projects park projects that are in flood zones, the amphitheater could be built there. I don't know what the additional cost of making it flood proof will be. And I'm going to explore that with my son just to get a ballpark figure. I do think the mayor's comment about the accessibility is a problem. I think the acoustics and the setting would just be gorgeous down there. But the accessibility is definitely a concern. Ron and I talked about at one time when we had a concert or something down there, we'd end up having to do a shuttle service from Montero down to it for that. But I think we ought to be thinking about, is there some other property that the city has or could acquire for that purpose? And I think that's something a long-term thinking will be. In the meantime, I'll be trying to get just a ballpark figure on what it might cost to build it so it would be flood proof.
Great. That sounds like a good way to go. Okay, the next couple of items, birdhouses for specific species. I think again, if we've got, that would be a potential scout project. And I think that, you know, we probably, other than budgeting for the scout reimbursement fund, I think we wait until we have a scout that's interested in a project like that and do some research and figure out what would be appropriate and locations. And we've got Dr. Ahrens is very knowledgeable and very interested in birding in our parks. So I think he would be a good resource for advice. And then I put in, oh, yes.
I had one more item that I had included in my remarks that didn't get on the list. And this is one of my pet peeves and has been for a long time on the Blue Trail. And I'm not sure there's a good solution for it, but I would like it on the list for long-range planning and thinking. And that is some sort of more permanent solution to the first creek crossing on the Blue Trail coming down from Montero, where the stepping stones have washed away, you know, on one side. And, you know, I think we've done a lot to try and make the park accessible, to make the trails accessible for hiking, but those slippery stepping stones coming down from the Montero trailhead, I think are a problem that, you know, we ought to think in terms of some sort of long-term solution for. And there may not be a good answer, but I would like it kept on the list or put on the list for future discussion.
Okay, will do. The next, I see we've gone almost an hour, and I'm just going to say one more thing, and then I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to talk a little bit about the playground planning. I added boot scrapers to my list because when I've walked and the trails are muddy and then I'm going to get back in my car to drive home. And I think that's something we can just, you know, they aren't that expensive. We just have to think about making them, securing them to something that won't walk away. And if anyone else thinks that's a good idea, we can pursue that.
I think it's a great idea. I didn't know it was a thing, but yeah.
Well, Kevin mentioned it when he was hiking with me one day, and he said, well, we've got them at the golf course. You know, they aren't that big a deal. You ought to just, you know, have one at each trailhead for each park.
I mentioned it to people who were down there in the park, and they were like, that is a phenomenal idea. And I was like, well, this Linda Wardell, she has a great idea. Yeah.
So I'll try to price them out and talk to Ron about what he thinks would work. And if we've got money in the budget this year, we could, I mean, in the current fiscal year, it might be something we could just do. And otherwise it's, you know, it's not a high dollar item. So I think we could certainly plan for that. So Sarah, why don't you talk to everyone about what we're looking at, or I don't know how much you want to talk about the playground, but that has been an idea that's been tossed around.
Yeah, sure. Hey, Ron, do you have do you have that link with a picture that you could share your screen in a second? Just while I'm talking, if you could bring, if not, if you let me share my screen, I can do it. So we have talked about, and this is slightly bigger than sort of a parks vision. It also goes into the city has a small working group that was working on kind of the vision for the city and the mission statement, strategic objectives for things like a no kidding 10-year out. So that's why I was saying some of these things where this list is to envision that 10+ year plan. So to get past the one fiscal year budget look at a time, like to push it all the way out. So to have a meeting place, a community place in Prospect. And so that sort of tip of the iceberg idea has become Little Hunting Creek Park. And so there is and that the mayor has signed a contract with Milestone to look at, or to get the engineering plans basically. So hopefully we can do construction as long as the numbers look good, to expand the parking lot. If you're looking at City Hall on the left-hand side, closest to 42, about 100 feet out from the existing parking lot, the width is a car, two drive lanes, and then a car. So it really doesn't impede upon much of the park, but you'll get parking to facilitate the playground, which is what Linda's talking about, and putting a playground set back. There is a portion, there's a hillside in Little Hunting Creek Park, a small hillside that hasn't flooded in over 20 years. And so it's kind of a prime spot to be able to put that. It's over 150 feet, which is basically, it's about 53 yards from 42. So in terms of safety and kids, we're talking about fencing it in with a 4-board fence. There's also a fence up by 42. So me having a 4-year-old, we put a lot of thought, obviously, from her perspective of running wild and crazy. But, you can't put it in Putney Pond, Harrods Creek Park floods, Cowley Park. I'll take it. I'm a Hunting Creek resident, but it's a bit of a shame for the rest of the community that, Hunting Creek would get so much of the goodies, if you will. And then there's houses that back up right to Cowley Park. And I'm not sure they'd appreciate us creating a scenario with a bunch of little kids running around. So Little Hunting Creek Park has been chosen. We've had all pro bono a picture of the parking lot created, and then full design plans of the playground. So whenever Ron is ready, just so you guys can have a peek, the intent is to be fully handicap accessible. And if you can't do it, no worries. Fully handicap accessible from the parking lot with a path down to basically a ramp that would come up. So there's the parking lot. His green square is where the playground would be. These would be in phases. The parking lot coming first, the playground coming right after that. We're talking about like next fiscal year, hopefully. And then phase 2, being that sort of purple line is basically like a pathway that would go all the way, meander through the park. The other little blocks you see are benches and picnic tables to where people could gather and eat lunch with your kid and whatnot. So there's picnic tables out there, but this is a bit more of an organized function of it. And they're laid outside of where it traditionally ever floods. So Ron has put a lot of thought into that piece to include, like I said, where the playground goes. So you can see that the path, again, the playground being phase 1, the pathway being with the benches and picnic tables being like a phase 2, and a phase 3, that yellow circle being like a gazebo or some kind of shaded area where, again, you could kind of commune, chat with neighbors, etc. And then long-term vision stuff would be to, maybe put a bridge over the creek and you connect to the boardwalk that's in Putney Pond. We can't encroach upon that property. It would be right outside of that because, again, we can't put that kind of stuff, on that land. So this is kind of a bigger project. Like I said, it's under parks, but it's also goes into a much larger idea of sort of a city community place. We are applying for a grant, and Linda, you can holler or wave whenever you want me to stop because I know we're short on time. So the Land and Water Conservation Fund is a 50-50 match grant. So I'm in the middle of, I've submitted one of the longer things that takes 30 days. I've submitted that today. It's due by the end of May, the whole grant. And again, it'd be a 50-50 match. We wouldn't be able to spend the funds till the very beginning of 2022. And so this is a way to potentially fund and get this all in one go, not all those phases, but the playground piece to instantly get sort of, people with disabilities, older people with mobility issues, younger people with mobility issues, wheelchairs, strollers, the whole 9 yards, to be able to come to a place to be able to enjoy the City Hall. And the hope is to be able to advertise through, if the Boy Scouts can create kind of a kiosk, or we can create projects for some of those things, that we could advertise for the library, and get that beautiful underutilized space used. And then we could advertise for a couple other services at Prospect, and kind of and push from there. I have pictures on here I can share of what the playground spec looks like. The colors are incorrect, but I'm happy to show that if anyone's interested in sort of the, I don't call that in the weeds. I think that's kind of a main item, but I'm happy if no one wants to see it, that's okay too. If we're sort of
Why don't you do that, Sarah? Why
Okay.
don't you do that? And why don't you also tell them about the company we've been talking to?
Perfect. Okay. Ron, are you okay if I share my screen? Is that okay? I'm going to assume he's saying yes because he's on mute. So I apologize, I don't have it up, so you'll see a lot of my computer screen here for a second. So, or you'll just see a lot of my random photos. I don't know how much you are looking at, so I apologize. Okay, I'm going to click through. So the color scheme is different. Am I sharing? Is everyone seeing this?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So the color scheme is overall mostly the same. There's a few exceptions. The rooftops are not going to be that green. There'll be a brown to blend in the background, and the tree toppers, the little conifer looking things to the top decoration wise, will be a shade darker green. And then the slides will stay that lighter green, just so it's not so hot for the kids. Anybody can jump in and holler if you have a question while I flick through them, but this just gives you, this is all pro bono. The company is called DWA Recreation. They basically reach out and do a lot of work with, I'm going to keep scrolling so you guys can just kind of take a peek at, maybe I can't scroll. Maybe it only lets me share one video or one photo at a time. They basically reach out and help communities apply for this particular grant. So the Land and Water Conservation Fund. You can do playgrounds, amphitheaters. It's basically anything outdoor recreation that can provide for the community. And so you can see kind of some climbing features. I'll show you the back of it, and I think you'll kind of get the gist of kind of what we're looking at. So they have put this together for free with some feedback based on, hey, this is kind of what we want to make sure it's accessible. There's those little flowers or little talking tubes for kids. There's things you can climb on. There's things you could do from the ground. There's little tactile things you can mess with. This little butterfly thing, this faces the creek side. Again, it would have a 4-board fence around it for safety. But they put it together and they help you apply and make sure that you can meet all the requirements for the grant. Okay, these are about all the pictures I sort of have. Does anybody have any pictures while I have it up, and I'll stop sharing this view?
I've only seen one picture. It's the same.
Oh, have you really? Did I move too fast? Does anybody see the picture with the butterfly?
The first picture you put up there is still up there. There you go.
Oh, it hasn't changed.
There you go.
Oh, okay. I was moving too quickly. So you saw the front. This would be the back then. So I apologize. I flipped through a couple that were the sides, but you can see the same. So this would be the back facing the creek side. So just that little pop of color with the little butterfly climb up thing. There's some net climb up things. There's monkey bar stuff. The smaller, this is from 5 to 12 years old. There's the small kid stuff over on the right-hand side for a small sled. A little very low angle rock climb up thing on the underside. There's stuff they can fiddle with and play with, little fossil type things. And then the sort of older age is off to the left-hand side where you see the kind of the butterfly and the little lily pads they can climb up to get up to the platform. There's some ladders and some other climbing stuff. So they have put this together for us. They do a full cost estimate. They have been incredibly upfront with their pricing. We still would have to put out to bid if we were to get the federal funding. Like I said, it's 50-50. You do an interview process over the summer. So it's due the end of May. You do an interview process for sort of early fall, late summer, to where you present a full scope. You present all the phases. They like to be involved in an entire project. The funds are good for 3 years, but you can only have one open project at a time. So the idea would be to beat feet on building that playground primary structure at the beginning of the year. And like I said, it kind of goes into some larger stuff for the city. So don't think it's going to eat up all of your park funds, because it is kind of going into a bigger vision of a communal place. Linda, what else do you want me to chat about? I could probably talk much longer.
No, I think that's, obviously Sarah's put a lot of time and effort into this, and it's very, very much appreciated. You know, we're gonna let Sarah run with what the proposal is for this year's budget for the playground. I'll work with Ron to get a handle on some of the maintenance dollars that we need to estimate for next year.
Well, there's two things I'd like to have Sarah address. One is the amount of money we're talking about, and the second is, what about liability insurance?
Okay, so for the money piece, so we've updated with a poured surface, which would be super minimal maintenance. So it'll be a shade over 100K. And that would be the full price if we didn't get the grant, would be a shade over 100K. We'll get the full price of basically the phase 2 and phase 3 probably tomorrow with updated pictures of the color scheme and whatnot. But the playground itself, basically a shade over 100K. There's a way to save about $30,000 in install cost if we do kind of a community build, and that's something we can address later down the road. And I can tell you about that. In terms of the liability piece of it, so Aaron Parrish is the guy at KLC, and I will have Chris Gorman meet with him to get an actual, it's not face-to-face anymore, but whatever, a COVID face-to-face. But the answer is there is no additional liability insurance required. We're covered as part of basically being a KLC member already. The thing you could insure extra is the actual playground equipment itself, and that may be something that the city wants to discuss. Is, you know, if we have a freak, knock on wood, it's never flooded there, you know, you just don't know. That would probably be a minimal cost, and that may be something we want to investigate, and I'm happy to look into that. But in terms of our liability as a city, there's some signage we do have to put up, and LWCF, Land and Water Conservation Fund, mandates we do that as well. So that's not just us, but it's things like, you know, hey, this portion of the playground is designed for this age range. You need to be supervised by a parent, you know, and then there's, you know, it's those statements that need to be on there, and we're mandated to do that anyways. But KLC and all of their legal might, there is no extra insurance for the city to buy. So the cost would be the playground, and if we chose to insure the pieces. Does that answer both of those to anyone's likings?
Yeah, a follow-up question. You talked about 100,000 without the grant. Am I correct?
Correct. So
if we got the grant, it would be half of that.
Correct. If we got the grant, it would be 50,000. Now, what I would workshop with you all, and this is something really to talk to the other council members about as well, is it is a reimbursable grant, which means you need to budget 100K, and you need to be prepared to pay that and be repaid. And so a piece of that, if we're prepared to budget, again, this is kind of bigger discussions, would be if we get the grant, then we have that 50K instead of putting that back in the coffers. Maybe we do phase 2 on the spot there with that money. So we spend the 100K. And again, this is me just talking right now. So this is something to workshop at a higher level. And I don't know how much phase 2 costs, because there was talk that, you know, he's going to give us a drawing with swings as well, swings in front of that, and a pathway. That was not on Ron's drawing, and I failed to mention that. But there would be, you know, swings at some point. Swings are actually really cheap. It's the surface underneath them that's very expensive. And it takes up a large footprint. So my thought is we budget for the 100K and we be prepared to do a bigger portion of the project. Something for the parks to keep in mind is that 50K wouldn't just dump back into kind of the parks, you know, free budget. But I'm also going to strongly advocate that this playground is not counting against, you know, like the parks can't do anything else. They're getting a playground because this is part of a city vision. And again, I'm talking right now, but I will strongly support that. And I think there's other people who agree with that. The part that it doesn't count completely against the parks.
Sarah, how many children will the playground safely accommodate?
You know, it is written down in the sheet, and I think it's 55. I can actually open that. They design it for a total number of accommodation, and if you give me a second, it is. Let me find it. So you all keep talking. It's on one of my drawings I've got here. it's 55.
Does anyone have any other comments about reactions to this idea? As someone that has 2 grandchildren that live nearby, I think it would be great.
Yeah, I think it's great too. And my experience in visiting playgrounds with my granddaughter is that at no particular time of the day are they that crowded. I mean, people visit playgrounds at different hours on different days. And so the likelihood of a playground, being more crowded than it could accommodate at any one time, I think is relatively unlikely.
So we're probably not going to have 2 kids on swings and 53 of them waiting their turn.
Yeah, and just to give you an idea for the footprint size, this is kind of one of the smallest kind of footprints. It's a 40 feet by 50 foot, and that includes the surface around the plate. So there's a buffer, around all the sides. So it's actually, the footprint itself of the equipment is actually pretty small. So this was one of the smallest kind of structures we could base. I mean, you can get something smaller for like, 2 to 4 year olds and just do that age group, but to kind of accommodate through a still a younger person, but that 10-year-old or so who could come out and play with a younger sibling. This was probably one of the smallest things you could do. Is that kind of where we're going with it, Dawn? Was kind of the idea of size, or was it just to make sure it could accommodate people? I just want to make sure I answered your question.
I was just curious to the size and the accommodation.
Gotcha.
What you've shown right there looks almost identical to what we have in Bridgepoint. And the one in Bridgepoint's behind my house. It's back behind next to tennis courts behind the swim club. It is used all the time. The minute the weather's pretty, and of course we're a smaller footprint than all of the city is, but we always have 5, 6, 7 folks over there, and we've got some benches and stuff, and they've even put a grill in back there, but that has more to do when the pool's open. But it's used all the time, and we have a swing, one of those tire type swings there too, but it's used all the time.
Sure. Is it easily expandable, such as we want to build it larger in the future?
Yes. To an extent, yes. So the yes is the answer. It would depend on kind of which pieces you're talking about, but yeah, yes.
Since nobody's talking, Linda, I'm going to say, I think this is very exciting. And I'm selfish because I have a granddaughter who I want to have play on it.
I will say I did get at the top of Hunting Creek. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 next to me, 5 different houses that have that I've spoken to personally that has turned over in the last year, and they all have more than one younger child, and I'm talking young from like 2 to 8 sort of thing. One of them has twins that are much younger than that. But all new families, and they're like, where is it? I want to go. And is it open yet? And I'm like, okay, well, it's not open yet. We're talking about it. And they're like, well, okay, where do I look to find out when it's done? What am I going to see it being built, et cetera? And they have been super excited about the location because they're like, City Hall. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's there. You pass by it every day. It's the one with the big clock, and so to integrate them into that. And then I didn't even mention the library, so to really cue them into those things, I think is a super, super big opportunity for the city.
Well, this is great. I see we've gone for more than an hour. We have not gotten through all of the ideas, although I think we've hit on the most important ones. If anyone has any other comments about maybe some of the projects we didn't talk to that you really want to make sure we're including in our budget request, perhaps you could send me an email. One of the things that we had hoped to do last year and couldn't because of COVID is a summer concert series. And I've got to talk to a few people about that, but we might want to try to put some money in the budget for that.
For
Well,
next
I
year,
have a
you
comment.
thinking for 2022?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a comment.
certainly.
I think we should give a round of applause to Sarah Odell for all the work she's put in on this playground.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Checks in the mail.
Oh,
Okay. Does anyone else have anything they would like to say now? Otherwise, I think we should end the meeting, and we'll keep talking about these various projects in our next time together. Oh, we do need to talk about a next meeting day and time. I did have Sally has expressed to me that it's very difficult for her to get to a meeting in the middle of the workday because she actually does have another job. And she was asking if we could go back to trying to do a meeting at 5 o'clock. Monday would be the only day we could do a meeting at 5 o'clock because we need Ron to host our meetings and we need his input on things we're doing in the parks. I was looking at the schedule or at the city calendar. It looks like the April council meeting is on the 19th. I don't know if meeting on the 12th at 5 o'clock would be a possibility for everyone.
Works for me.
Okay, well, let's try that, and hopefully Sally will be able to join us at that time. As long as everyone else is able to accommodate that time. Okay.
Need to write up your budget request.
Yes, Laura has told me that she wants it submitted by the 19th at noon, March 19th at noon. So
that's before your next meeting.
It is before our next meeting, but you know, we have not, typically in the past, the committee has not voted on the request. It's been something that a couple of us have worked on and submitted. You know, I've worked on it with input from Ron, and then when Stuart was on city council, he was very involved in it. So I actually see the key people probably being Sarah and Ron and me. And I've already started working on some of my ideas and we'll be bouncing it off them. So that's why if there's something you really want to see in the budget, please email me and we can have a discussion about that.
Yeah, you got to put in those fishing pole holders.
Well, I consider those a Boy Scout project, so we have money for Scout reimbursement. And I see, Lynn, I guess I'll ask you this question, but I see us keeping that request the same. We've not used all the reimbursement money available, but I think projects will become, I think we'll have more of them in the next year.
We're still not meeting yet as of yet, and so hopefully that'll resolve. Now, we are planning, summer camps are all coming back this summer, and so, and we got to get our membership built back up too, but we'll see.
Linda, when will we be hearing back from Ecotech or whatever their name is these days regarding Putney Pond? What's their schedule?
I don't think they've started that project yet. Ron and I were out at Putney Pond with the two people that are doing invasive plants, and they were just cataloging all the plants that were in the park that they will turn over to Lee. And then Lee is meeting with this expert on sustainable streams. But I don't expect us to have a report until closer to the end of this fiscal year. So not in time for the budget.
Well, they do understand that the funding that exists right now runs out at the end of June.
They do know that. In fact, in the wording in the contract says all work to be completed and billed before June 30th.
Okay. Well,
so they're very aware of that.
Good.
Anything else? Thank you all for a good meeting. I guess, do we need to vote to adjourn? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I so moved.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.
Take
Thank you.
care.
Thanks, everybody. Good to see you.
See you.
See you guys.